So this is the deep dive, spoiler-filled discussion of The Tagalong, 2015 movie from Taiwan. If you haven't seen the original review yet and you haven't seen the movie, I recommend you watch that first. This will be full of plot points, spoilers, and general discussion all over the place. So, moving right along. The review, I covered that there were some pretty big cultural differences between Asian horror and horror in the rest of the world, especially America. And I think the thing that I really want to tackle with that, and I will be getting into the Tagalong movie itself during this, I just kind of want to lead up to it, is, like I was saying in the review, especially within the context of American horror, the horror aspect of it, let's just call it the mythos. In the case of Nightmare on Elm Street, it would be the whole Freddy Krueger invading your dreams, just the story behind the scares, the mythos, is the vehicle in which the story is presented to the characters, and in using those characters as the protagonist that the viewer can latch on to is the way that the story gets told. And typically the story is more about aspects of humanity that are the real scary things that the mythos brings to light through the journey. With Asian horror, what I found, and this is not by any means spread across or like a hard and fast rule, it's just something that I've seen throughout the course of many, many movies, a general theme and a general difference in feel overall, is the mythos is the story in Asian horror, and that's what it goes out to tell. And it doesn't mind blasting through characters to do that. It's not rare that you will have many protagonists throughout an Asian horror movie, and it doesn't really serve you to latch onto one, and it can be really jarring. It'll present you with a main character and then throw them away, start a whole new story. Maybe it'll have a loose connection. That person that the main character bumped into at the gas station 5 minutes into the movie, his turn to follow him and dive further into the mythos that the first character did, but now we're going to take it a next step. Or, whatever the first character went through, we're going to repeat in a slightly different fashion and approach it at a different angle. But the mythos is the story, and it's difficult for Western audiences, I think, to embrace that because it can be jarring. It does give you less to latch onto because we are big on our protagonists. We are big on latching onto one character and following them through a storyline from Act 1 to the finish of Act 3. And it often will lead to an unsatisfactory conclusion. And by that I mean not necessarily a unhappy ending. Horror is full of unhappy endings. It's almost its bread and butter. Sometimes the main character will win. Sometimes nobody wins except for the evil. It depends on how they want the story told. By unsatisfactory conclusion, what I mean is it will often end abruptly and without a tidy bow put on everything and everything fully fleshed out and answered. It'll almost be, you'll have one character who will go through his steps, the second character go through his steps, third character will go through her steps, and time to roll credits. And it can make you feel a little, where's the rest? The reason I love Asian horror so much is because the mythos is so good and the creepiness factor is so good, and they do such a fantastic job in storytelling that I accept those cultural differences for exactly what they are. They're not a pro, they're not a con, they're just different. And you kind of have to watch them for on their own merit. The part of Asian horror, and I think honestly, I'm probably going to get railed for this, but whatever. This is just my opinion. This is my channel, and if you disagree with me, I really do welcome you to leave comments below, and I will be answering them and engaging in discussion. But for me, in a lot of Asian storytelling, and I've seen this in animes, I've seen this in movies, I've seen this in TV shows, I've seen this in writing, the mythos will tend to get dissected to the point of exhaustion. And I think that's one of the inherent problems that you have with making the mythos the point of the story. The characters are there. If you haven't seen the anime Death Note, I think it's the perfect example of how when you put the mythos in the spotlight and then you have the characters run through it in every single angle they possibly can, poking holes through it in every possible way and finding every single possible way to approach it, at some point it just becomes exhausting and you want to move on. It gets lost in itself. And that is the point. That is the line in which my love for Asian horror and the acceptance of the cultural differences starts to wane a bit. I love the way that they tell stories. I love the creepiness factor. I love the historic cultural elements of it. The aspects of the culture of the particular countries and the way that these stories have been told for generations, and now being adapted to the screen. I love those elements of it. But when it gets lost in itself and it becomes too dissected, too ad nauseum, too approached from so many different angles, and just hammered, that's when it starts to lose me. So rounding this back to the tag along, which is the purpose of this deep dive discussion, the aspects of it where it jumps characters, it did that, but not so terribly. It kind of kept within the same core grouping of them. For me, I just wasn't expecting the girlfriend to all of a sudden become the main character, a third or halfway through the movie. I thought, but it kept on her, and I thought it did a fairly good job of exploring her emotions, exploring her storyline. I thought it did a pretty decent job with that. But again, it was not afraid to switch protagonists. But I do like that it was encased within a core group of main characters, that there wasn't a loose, flimsy connection that they wanted to simply, hop from one to the next. And as far as the mythos getting lost in itself, I don't think it really was. I thought that they actually did a pretty good job of dealing with the main storyline, dealing with the main character's journey throughout, and it didn't really hammer this whole girl in the red dress thing to death. It didn't. Again, in my review, I explained that I thought it tackled too many subtext plots, and I maintain that. I think that having what I'm assuming, I could have been reading this wrong, and sometimes I don't speak Japanese, I don't speak Chinese, I don't speak any language other than English, and bad Spanish. So some of this might have gotten lost in the subtitle translations. I don't know, but my understanding of it is that the girlfriend, at some point in her life prior to meeting her boyfriend, had an abortion. That was what I got out of some of the climax in the forest. But that was one aspect of it. The deforestation, cutting down trees, you remove their souls, and they have to, come snag them from the human world. The abandonment and neglect of the grandmother character, the distancing themselves, the boyfriend and girlfriend from one another. I thought there was just too many elements that it tried to tackle, and ultimately whatever message it was trying to convey got lost in the mix. So I didn't really see a lot of a core centralized thing for me to latch onto as a storytelling element that I identified with and could roll with. Even so, I thought that the scare elements were good, that the storyline was decent, and again, the acting was pretty phenomenal. The scene where the girlfriend is in the fancy house and towards at the end when she's in her dream, I thought was very well done. I do have an issue with that, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. But the performances between the boyfriend and the girlfriend at that point were just off enough to let you know that something was up. And I really liked that. I thought it was very subtle. It was very clear that this was not the real world. This was not even a real, real dream, I guess. That there was something fictitious and malicious going on without any obvious clues to that. So I really did enjoy that. The thing I wanted to get to is the dream aspect. I thought that this is an element that you see in a lot of horror movies where something will be going terribly wrong and character wakes up, oh, it was a dream. And that works to a point. I say that you have no more than one, as a hard and fast rule, you have no more than one opportunity to use that in a horror movie. 2 is a gray area. You might get away with it. But when you use it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, the audience starts to lose interest in the whole idea of the dream, and they start to... What will wind up happening is they'll start to lose interest in the entire movie, because if you're not sure what's real and what's not, what's the point of it? The only exception that I take to that is the Nightmare on Elm Street series, just because that is the plot device, the plot element. At no point are you sure exactly what's real, what's a dream. The dream itself is dangerous. That's an important aspect of this. The reason that there's so much disassociation going on and why it only works once is because the nature of having it be just a dream removes the danger from it. So if you are wondering what is reality and what is a dream at any point during the movie, because they've used the darn trope so often, and dreams pose no danger, is you are under the impression that at no point is there any danger. So it does remove you from the protagonist's vision and the scary viewpoints of things, that whatever's happening to them, you know that there's the strong possibility that nothing's actually happening and they're going to wake up just fine. And that's where the Nightmare series obviously differs from that. So I thought that the tag-along did overuse that. And yeah, I really don't really have much else where to go with that. If you like the movie, if you didn't like the movie, if you agree with me on any aspect of this or disagree with me on any aspect of this, I know I raised a lot of points on this particular one. Whatever you feel, I invite you to leave it in the discussions. Write some comments, like, dislike, subscribe, unsubscribe if you're already subscribed and you didn't like this at all. Whatever you want to do, I welcome it, and welcome some engagement and some discussion. I will respond to anything that is written. So until next time, until tomorrow, thank you for joining me here on RotD.